Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with her encore, Tom. How's it going?
Tony, I just had this horrible realization that next week is going to be November. Literally next week, it's November. Every year we have this same conversation about this same time, that we wait all year for the season and then you go from, oh, it's the first game, it's great, we're finally back. And then it's all of a sudden like, what? How? The college playoff committee is going to start doing their shows when? Sorry, what? Every year, Tony, I don't know. We recognize that this is going to happen, and every year we're completely caught off guard.
Yeah, it's boom. We kind of joke about it. Big Ten Media Days. Just think, by tomorrow, we're going to be talking about how, gosh, this season went by so fast. Where did it go? And now we're starting the second half of the regular season, which is the middle portion of perhaps the entire season. As Ryan Day said this past week, there's maybe like 10 games left, and it's like, well, I guess, yeah. I mean, that's a way to look at it. And there's still a lot of games to be played, but also a lot of games have already been played. And now Ohio State onto their 7th game of the year, hosting the Nebraska Cornhuskers, who come into Ohio Stadium with a 5-2 record. There were some thought, we'd both talked about, hey, could be 7-0 when they come to Columbus. This is back in the summer, of course, before we knew that Curt Cignetti was Nick Saban, basically, and destroying everybody at Indiana.
Nick Saban did not win this many games in his first year at Alabama. So no, he's Curt Cignetti better than Nick Saban.
Hey, he's doing better in the Big Ten than Nick Saban ever did. Let's just go ahead and throw that out there right now. But enough about Indiana. We'll talk about Indiana week is fast approaching. Tom mentions it every day on the Buckeyes tomorrow morning in terms of, 22 days until Indiana, 21 days until Indiana. And it'll be here soon enough. But first, the Nebraska Cornhuskers, who have not exactly been lighting the world on fire, 56-7 last week to Indiana, beat Rutgers 14-7. Not a fantastic game to watch. I wouldn't recommend doing it unless you're that kind of person. But let's start with the Ohio State offense, because they come in here without Josh Simmons. So Zen Michalski will be getting the start at left tackle. Ryan Day wants to throw the deep ball more. And Will Howard says, well, we haven't really called it much, but when I'm up in the press box, I can see when guys are there, there's no safety over top. It's like there are opportunities. So maybe we see that more this week. But Tom, we mentioned in the bold prediction show, Nebraska has not given up any 50-yard pass plays this season. If that is going to change, how much does Zen Michalski matter in all of that too?
Well, Zen Michalski is going to be a big piece of that, because a lot of the deep throws, you got to give the quarterback 3.5 seconds back there. And that means you got to hold up with your pass rush. And a lot of times, this is not just going to come down to Zen Michalski.
Sure.
If you can run the ball, that keeps the defense a little more honest and keeps them from, Tony, get ready for cliche or alert, pinning their ears back, Tony, and be in predictable passing situations. If you can stay on schedule and you can keep the defense guessing a little bit and not be one-dimensional, that makes it a lot harder for the defense to just purely pass rush and really put pressure on your line. But it's going to be a challenge. We've talked about Josh Simmons a bunch in terms of being the one guy they really couldn't afford to lose. Well, now they've lost him, and they've lost him for the season. So now what? I think this is a defense where Nebraska's defense is a lot better than Nebraska's offense. So I think this is a game where I think a lot of Ohio State fans are looking and going 56-7 against Indiana. This team's terrible. Ohio State's better than Indiana. They should score 70 points. I feel like that's kind of the general vibe. Like, well, Nebraska's terrible. Nebraska's not as bad as they looked against Indiana, because they had a bunch of short fields. They were 0 for 5 on 4th down last week. They turned the ball over 5 times. You do that, things get out of hand pretty quickly. I'm not expecting that to necessarily be the case this week. I think this is one where you have to sort of prepare yourself between new offensive linemen. We'll see about Quinshon Judkins' availability. We'll see about, a lot of that kind of stuff. I think you need to sort of prepare yourself for a game in the 30s on the Ohio State side of things rather than the 50s. And just, you kind of need to, I think, be okay with that, because I don't think the 50s is going to be an area that, if that's your expectation, I don't think you're going to be happy.
Yeah, and it's something we've kind of had to dial back throughout the course of the season with just the fewer possessions and the time, the clock, the way it runs now, and the huddling. So 45 is the new 52, I think is a fair thing to say. The Nebraska defense that you're talking about, 18th in the nation, giving up just over 300 yards of total offense, doing pretty well. But when they face teams that can run and throw a little bit, then they have a little bit of trouble. Illinois rushed for 166 yards. Indiana rushed for 215 yards. Now, the Indiana performance, there are 5 turnovers and I believe 5 failed fourth down attempts for Nebraska. So let's, you kind of just have, that's a complete outlier. Indiana was favored by 6.5 in that one. Ohio State, I just looked, is favored by like 25.5. So those are maybe more representative numbers than Ohio State needs to win this one by 43 points or whatever. Like, I wouldn't expect that. You need so many things to go right. And sure, if Ohio State gets 5 turnovers, they better be scoring, 45, 56, something like that in this one. Because if they're not, then they're not doing well on offense. They're not cleaning it up like they should. But I think right now, the Ohio State offense, we mentioned wanting to throw deep and things like that, but I would also like to see them pick the running game back up. Quinshon Judkins had his lowest yards per carry of his career last week, like 2.1. Never been that bad. Now, is he playing? Ryan Day seemed to say he's okay, but that doesn't mean he's going to play. That just means, game time decision. We decided to wanted them to be healthy for Penn State. I won't be surprised if he doesn't play, Tom. I'm guessing you won't be surprised if he doesn't play, given the history of Ryan Day and injuries and this new paradigm of college football where week 8 isn't nearly as important as week 14.
Yeah, this feels like a game where Quinshon Judkins is available.
Yeah.
He's there. He's at the stadium, got his helmet and everything. He's available. Is he going to play? Over under on number of carries for him, 0.5. Tony, your guess is?
I'm not. That's one I'm going to steer clear of. Ryan Day did say he's feeling better than he did before the game. So, and he played last week or 2 weeks ago. So if he's better since then get him ready so that he's not just 2-3 weeks removed from playing a game, and then now you've got to go play against Penn State. I think it would be good to keep his legs fresh and get him back into things. So we'll see where that goes. Overall, Nebraska pretty darn good on defense. I wonder what would happen if they played Colorado again at this point. They held the Buffaloes to 10 points in week 2. Illinois got it for 31, but other than the Indiana outlier, they held Purdue to 10, Rutgers to 7. Now, those are not good offenses, so take all of that with a big grain of salt. But this is a Nebraska defense that will make things a little bit difficult for Ohio State. They run like a 3-3-5, but one of the 3 linebackers is a stand-up edge rusher, and they'll give different fronts and different looks. They get after the quarterback a little bit. I think they're just pretty sound, and we talked about not giving up a bunch of long plays. They've given up the 9th fewest plays of 20-plus yards this season. So they're sound. They get the job done. If Ohio State can establish that run, then I think that will undo everything else. That will allow everything else. And I really think they're going to want to get that done just so that it can build some momentum going into next week at Penn State.
Yeah, this is a defense that's good but not great. And a good but not great defense means if Ohio State is good but not great, they should be able to move the ball on Nebraska, because just the ceiling for the Ohio State offense is much higher than the ceiling for Nebraska's defense. And I'm with you. I think they probably are going to be trying to move the ball on the ground just because, as I said earlier, if you can run the ball, then you stay multidimensional. That helps protect your pass pro guys, that helps keep just helps keep all the options on the table. And Chip Kelly is a sort of ground game first guy by nature anyway. So I think that's probably going to be the answer in a lot of games, is Chip Kelly would like to run the ball more. And they ran the ball okay at times against Oregon. Travion Henderson hit a couple really big ones against Oregon back-to-back. And Will Howard had a touchdown run, and they moved the ball at times on the ground against Oregon. Oregon is going to be one of the better defenses they play all season long, postseason included. So this is going to be a little bit of a step back. Okay, you went from Heisman difficulty, and now you're on like All-American difficulty. It's not JV, but it's going to be a little easier. The throws are probably going to be a little easier. The holes might be a little bigger for the running backs, and this is a team that Ohio State should be able to move the ball against. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be just bombs away 80-yard touchdowns or 80-yard touchdown runs all day long. But they should be able to move the ball consistently enough to stay on schedule and kind of consistently put up points. To me, the defensive side of the ball, that's where the real variance is. Like, I think Ohio State's offense is going to do more or less what I think Ohio State's offense is going to do. I don't think the error bars there are, well, they might get completely shut out or they might score 80 points on offense. I don't, they're not going to go for 12 yards of play on this team. If they're at 6 yards of play on this team, 5 yards of play on this team, that's fine. That'll win the game for them. On defense, that's where the real question is, because if the difference last week was getting stops on fourth down for Indiana and turning the ball over for Indiana. Mm-hmm. And Nebraska has been turnover prone at times this year, which will happen with a true freshman quarterback. But Ohio State's defense has just not forced turnovers the last couple seasons, really. So can Ohio State force turnovers? If Ohio State forces 3 turnovers, this is a laugher. If Ohio State does not force a turnover, then this is probably a little bit more of an annoying game into the second half.
An annoying, like 31-17, 34-17 that is wholly unsatisfying to the fan base. Nebraska won their first 3 games by an average of 18 points. Now they're in Big Ten play, scoring 18 points a game, to give you an idea of how the offense has come back to earth. And we can start with Dylan Raiola, freshman quarterback. Ohio State fans know him well. 3 interceptions last week against Indiana, 1 interception 2 weeks before that in the last game against Rutgers. He has not thrown a touchdown pass the entire month of October. In fact, his last touchdown pass was September 28th at Purdue in a 28-10 win, and they've played twice since, and he's had 0 touchdown passes, 4 interceptions, completing, he completed 48% of his passes against Rutgers and 63% last week against Indiana, when Indiana could just sit back and go ahead and throw it, whatever, we're up by 1,000 points. Go ahead, and if you want to give us the ball, we'll take it. And so Raiola is middle of the pack in every single metric in the Big Ten, basically, as a passer, which as a freshman, that's pretty impressive. But he's a very confident guy, overconfident at times. I do wonder how much the Indiana game shook him, knocked him back a little bit, maybe humbled him a little bit in terms of what he can get away with. And so will he dial it back some in this game? Or is Matt Rhule going to tell him, just keep doing what you do? Like, we need that for this offense, because they need him to make as many plays as he can, because they can't run the ball. And we'll get to that in a second. But you didn't bring him in here for him to be careful. You knew there were going to be some growing pains. I don't know if you knew it'd be as painful at Indiana before the season. You may be expected that kind of game at Ohio State. But since he's already gotten that one out of his system, do you expect them to be like, hey, let's be a little bit more careful? Or is it a situation where, we've got to take every swing that we can in this game against an Ohio State defense? They gave up a ton of big plays the last time we saw them.
I think just Matt Rhule by nature is a shoot your shot. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take, close quote, Wayne Gretzky, Michael Scott, Matt Rhule. Like, that's Matt Rule's philosophy. That's why they were 0 for 5 on fourth downs last week, because he kept going for it at fourth down, because it's like, what's the goal here? Is the goal here to keep the score close? Is the goal to try and cover the spread, or is the goal to try and win the game? Well, if the goal is to try to win the game and you're down 28-7 in the third quarter and you get stopped on 3rd and 2 or whatever it was, you can punt and say, well, okay, we're going to try and lose this game 31-10 as opposed to 56-7, or you can go for it. And Matt Rhule by nature is very much a go for it kind of guy. I think Matt Rhule sees the big picture, and the big picture is, look, you're probably not going to beat Ohio State this week, but that's okay. You have other winnable games on your schedule. You're 1 game away from being bowl eligible, which is going to be a significant step forward. And this is a shoot your shot, take your swings. Maybe you land that, you throw one haymaker and you land a big knockout punch. I mean, it's possible. They're not going to win this game by playing it safe. Mm-hmm. And I think they're just going to they have to go into this with the mindset like, look, you got a true freshman quarterback. You got to let him make mistakes. Playing it safe and just being check down Charlie, and that's not going to help you this week. That's not going to help him in terms of development. Keep learning, keep shooting your shot, put stuff on film, and learn from your mistakes. And that's I think what the approach is going to be. I mean, you talked about how just average they've been. They are 58th in the country in quarterback rating. They are 59th in the country in terms of yards per passing attempt. And you just look at the teams around them, and it's Cal, Baylor, UCLA, UConn, West Virginia, Virginia Tech. It's a bunch of like very average middle of the pack teams. And that's fine. Like this is a 5-star true freshman quarterback. And what that means is sometimes you're going to get the 5-star plays, and sometimes you're going to get the true freshman quarterback kind of plays. And you just kind of have to accept that this year. This is not a year when they're going to win the national championship. If they can keep him on track, and you can turn yourself into a college football playoff team in a year or two as he continues to develop. This week, I don't know that this week is as much about beating Ohio State as it is about continuing his development, continuing their growth and progress as a team, and take your shot.
Yeah, and Raiola will spread it around to group of receivers, tight end Thomas Fidone, leading receiver, true freshman Ja'Cory Barney, 27 catches, averaging just 6.7 yards reception. So kind of a quick screen guy that doesn't always hit, but he's also, he averages twice as much per rush as he does per catch, which is one of the more interesting receiver stats that you'll see. But they've got guys average 45 yards receiving game, 34 receiving a game, 31 of their receivers. So no real go-to guy in the passing game. And the same can be said for the running game. They've started 3 different running backs this season and just trying to find some consistency there. And they haven't been able to do it very well so far. Rushed for 70 yards against Indiana, 97 against Rutgers the week before, managed 161 yards against Purdue, but the week before that, 48 yards against Illinois. So they should definitely be in the under 100-yard category, playing in this game against an Ohio State defense that is certainly going to be looking for some measure of let's get back to being what we know we can be. The rush defense is what it is. Shouldn't have glossed over the pass rush situation that we're expecting. Ryan Day is demanding some changes there, some improvements there. And I wrote on the message board, the Buckeye message board presented by Jeff Ruby Columbus, about how much does this defense want to show Penn State against a true freshman quarterback when you shouldn't necessarily need to show any kind of new tweaks to beat him. And somebody responded like, I'm tired of Ohio State trying to hide stuff and save stuff when they've got the talent. They shouldn't be saving stuff for anybody. And my point was, I'm saying the same thing as you. Ohio State has the talent. They shouldn't need to do new stuff to beat a true freshman quarterback. But as adamant as Ryan Day was, and as uncomfortable as all the coaches' meetings were these past 2 weeks, I'm expecting both. I'm expecting them to have some interesting stuff for Penn State, but also not. We'll see some new stuff this week.
Yeah, you're definitely going to see some new stuff this week. It doesn't have to be everything. You don't need to throw the kitchen sink at Nebraska, but you're going to certainly see. I'm sure they've spent a lot of time working on this in practice the last week or two. So you're going to see some of it this Saturday. You shouldn't need to throw everything at Dylan Raiola because A, he's a true freshman, and B, as you said, they really are not able to run the ball at all. Talked about the fact they were 59th in yards per attempt on the passing game. They are a full yard, exactly 1 yard per rush behind number 59 in the rushing game. Number 59 is Washington State at 4.71 yards per rush. Nebraska at 3.71 yards per rush, 96th in the country. They are as close to 128th or 129th in the country in rushing as they are to 59th, which is kind of like middle of the pack. So yeah, this is a team that you should be able to make one-dimensional. You should be able to get at least a decent pass rush on that quarterback, and you should be able to get him uncomfortable and get him off platform and get him making mistakes with just minimal changes, minimal tweaks. This is not one where you need to be doing all the stemming and all that Georgia was doing against Texas. This should be a relatively simple thing to have some significant improvements, and then we'll see what they really have in the bag when they go to Penn State in a week. But at the same time, I think you're going to have to see something. I think you're going to have to. There's probably going to be a little bit of you got to show a little bit of something, show a little bit of leg to keep sure. Yeah, okay, yeah. There is we're not just talking. There is something something behind it.
Yeah, show it this week, and then you don't have to do it next week. There, make everybody happy.
Tony, always great at keeping the Ohio State fan base perpetually in a very happy, very satisfied state. Yes, agreed.
It's just Penn State. We know it's not a big game, and if Ohio State wins, we know it's not a big win for Ryan Day, so why do you need to do anything special for that one? I am interested to see what happens without Lathan Ransom this week at strong safety. I'm leaning towards Jordan Hancock being involved at safety, and we will see if that comes true. And then does that change anything you want? Because to me, having him back there, he's experienced enough to be able to do whatever you need up front as well. Like, you don't need to necessarily worry about those two not meshing in terms of the front and the back with Jordan Hancock back there. So I think that's what they're going to be doing. I won't be shocked if it's not, but it just seems like if you want to keep everything veteran and as seamless as possible, you move Jordan Hancock to safety, and whether you go with Lorenzo Styles Jr., who is a fourth-year guy, or Jermaine Matthews, who I'm sure he's probably gotten more action at nickel this week, but has been mostly outside corner during the season. He spent all spring at nickel, so that could be something. He could become the dime guy as Lorenzo Styles was, but Lorenzo Styles has played quite a bit this season. We've seen him in games when they're still in doubt. We saw him play against Oregon, so I think that might be the way they go.
Yeah, this is an interesting one because you have like 4 or 5 different potential solutions, and they all have an argument for them. Sure, you could just put Jalen McClain in there because he's the guy who was the backup at the at the bandit position to Lathan Ransom, so then that is the least interruptive. You could put Malik Hartford in at the adjuster because he's been the backup at the adjuster all season and he has a year in the system, as opposed to Jalen McClain, and you move Caleb Downs over to the bandit. You could put Jordan Hancock in at the, one of the safety positions, whether it's the bandit or the adjuster, and then you move Caleb Downs as necessary, and you put Lorenzo Styles or Malik or Jermaine Matthews in at the nickel position. Yeah, there's a bunch of different ways you could sort of move the puzzle pieces around. I think I've kind of landed on the same answer as you have, which is probably put Lorenzo Styles at the nickel spot, put Jordan Hancock at probably the adjuster spot, and move Caleb Downs over to the bandit spot. You're changing a couple, 3 different positions there, but because of the way the safety spots are somewhat interchangeable, it's not as much of a change as it could be in other spots. So I think that's probably the most likely thing that they're going to do. I do think it's interesting that we have a better answer on the Josh Simmons and Mahalski thing than we do in terms of this is definitely what they're going to do. And I don't know if that's because they're still mixing and matching and trying to figure out what they're going to do, or if it's just, Zen Mahalski, we know he's going to be in there because we know Josh Simmons is out for the year and Lathan Ransom is, air quotes, day to day.
Yeah. And will the answer in the first quarter be the same answer in the third quarter or next week? And we'll see. That's they've prepared for this. They've tried to prepare for it. Everybody knows that players are going to get injured. Ryan Day said they've expected it. Not that they've expected this, but you've expected something to go wrong in terms of injuries. So you have to prepare for it. And so we'll see how that goes. Tom, I have thrown in my score prediction. I don't want to give mine to you before I hear yours. Have you decided?
Yeah, I have in there right now, Ohio State 34, Nebraska 6.
Okay.
Ohio State probably, you're going to have a drive or two that bogs down in the red zone. That's just you're probably kicking a couple field goals. Nebraska, though, on offense, if they're not able to run the ball and you don't have like real dynamic playmakers outside and you don't have like a Tyler Warren at tight end, I don't know how they're moving the ball down the field a bunch. So unless Ohio State turns it over and gives them a short field, I don't see a lot of long, 10-play, 75-yard kind of drives. I say that, and then Nebraska's going to do that on the opening drive, and everyone's going to go nuts. But it's probably not something they're going to be able to do consistently throughout the game. And when you can't run the ball in the red zone, I think you're run the risk of bogging down in the red zone. And so I'll say 34-6, and both teams kick 2 field goals.
All right. I was originally going to go 35-14, but it felt, I didn't quite like it. I went 42-14, which feels like a little too much, but I'm going to stick with that. And as I had the game playing on behind me here on the EA Sports, Ohio State wins 41-34. Would that go over?
Oh boy, would that not go over well? I'm just pulling up the over-under right now. The over-under is 48.5, so you have that game going over quite a bit. You're over by as much as I'm under by, but yeah, boy. If Ohio State gives up, 34 points? Oh boy, that will, we're not going to get to talk to Jim Knowles next week either, if they give up 34 points. Holy Moses.
So there you go. Before we go, if you want to hit the thumbs up on this YouTube video, we would appreciate that. And of course, if you have not yet subscribed to the channel, please do so and hit the bell to be notified when we drop new episodes of the Buckeye Weekly Podcast, and we go live. We will be going live after the game, and we've got plenty of stuff coming for you guys, as you all know. And continue to find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Fantastic time to become a premium subscriber at the website. Go ahead and sign up now. First month is $4.99. We'd appreciate you seeing it there. Say hello to us there on the message board as well. So thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys later.